Leadership is a funny thing. Most people say you're either born with it or you're not. Our first guest is here to tell you the truth about leadership skills. Please welcome Dr. Ed Pallas. And Ed, we appreciate you joining us. And I was reading last night, you have a very extensive background. Why don't you elaborate a little bit about what you've done over the course of your life?
I can sum it up in one word. I'm a nerd. I'm a big nerd. I'm a police officer. I'm a police commander. So I'm in charge of a police district in Montgomery County, Maryland, which is just outside Washington, D.C. We have about 1,100 officers and sworn. And in my district, we have roughly 115 officers that I work with. And I've had the pleasure to have a lot of experience doing undercover work, doing work in homicide, and being a hostage negotiator, in addition to being a police commander. So I've been very blessed with my police career. I've got a wonderful police department, and I've had lots of opportunities, and I've just taken advantage of them.
So leadership skills, what does a person need to have to be a good leader?
I think two things. One, they need to care about their people. That's first and foremost. And you can't fake that. Like, you can for a little bit, but then your people quickly figure it out.
Yeah.
And two, you need to care about the mission of your organization. So no matter what your role is, you have to balance those two things, the people you lead and the organization you're responsible to. And that's where it gets tricky.
Yeah.
It's very tricky.
You mentioned hostage negotiator.
Yes.
What is that like? And what are some myths that most people would have about being a hostage negotiator?
I think the first myth that most people have is that you're a lone hero, if you will, because you watch the movie The Negotiator with Samuel Jackson and Kevin Spacey, and you think it's a one man or one woman show, and that's not at all true. You will have one person on the phone or with the bullhorn, or even nowadays texting, negotiating with somebody. Yeah. But what you don't see is that person has a coach, and that coach has a full team, and that team has a leader, and that team leader has a support system. So there is a lot going on behind the scenes, kind of like in this situation where the focus is on us, but we have a huge support team here helping us out, which this wouldn't happen without them.
Exactly.
It's the same thing. So the myth is it's a one-person show. And then the second myth is kind of like leadership, that you're born to do it or you're not. And that's not at all true. Hostage negotiation and leadership are very similar in that it is a set of skills that can be taught, learned, and developed. Now, the caveat is not everybody can be a 10. And the other thing is your 10 might be different than my 10. But wherever you are on a scale of, for instance, 1 to 10, let's say you're naturally born a 5, with training, with coaching, with mentoring, you can go to a 6, a 7, maybe even an 8 or a 9. But the myth is people think you're born with it or you're not.
So you wrote a book basically about becoming a leader. Tell us about the book and why you wrote it.
Sure. So Leader Armor is the title of the book. And I've, again, been very fortunate to have taught around the country. I've actually taught leaders from all over the world with both the International Association of Chiefs of Police and FBI's Leadership Development Program. And the thing I started noticing is that the cops that were out there would go from what I call buddy to boss, where, you're one of the people, one of the boys or one of the girls, and then you get promoted, and it's kind of like good luck. And that's it.
Yeah. How do you separate that?
So it's easy and it's hard. The easy part is you have to set expectations, and you have to be able to have courageous conversations with your former friends and say, hey, when I'm in this role, I'm in this role, and let's set some boundaries. The hard thing is you have to realize that whatever brought you up as a newscaster or a police officer or a salesperson is a different set of skills you're going to need to then lead other newscasters, other police officers, other salespeople. And that skill set is something that needs to be sought out. It needs to be learned. And you can learn it through books, podcasts, going to classes, coaching, mentoring. But you have to be proactive and actually seek out those skills to better yourself. The problem is, and I'm going to quote an old dead guy, Abraham Maslow is credited for saying, if the only tool you have in your belt is a hammer, you tend to see every problem as a nail. And that's what I saw with most leaders. They weren't equipped with any metaphorical like tools on their belt. So they only knew discipline. They only knew, I'm going to rate you up, or I'm going to fire you, or I'm going to demote you, or whatever that punishment was. And it wasn't necessarily their fault, because their organization would promote them and say, hey, good luck, you can figure it out, but they wouldn't give them any skills. And so that's why I wrote the book. And it is geared toward first line supervisors and law enforcement. But I've had many private sector people say, the stories are really cool, but the core of it is for any leader that is going from a situation where they were one of the boys or one of the girls, and now they're a first-time manager, a first-time supervisor. And it's to give them a couple of tools to put on their belt so that they can build those relationships with their people. Because in the end, John Maxwell says leadership is about influence, nothing more, nothing less. Mm-hmm. I respectfully disagree with him, and he's one of my mentors. I think it's not just about influence, but it's about me helping you get to where you want to go. So if you're my direct report, part of building that relationship is I got to figure out what are your hopes, desires, and dreams. Because part of my job as your boss is to help get you there. And that's a piece that so many leaders they lose track of. And some of it is because I want to go get mine. I want to go get mine. And if I help you, maybe you'll pass me, and that could be a bad thing. But we have to put that aside, and we have to kind of pay it forward. And when you can help somebody get to where they want to go, there is no better feeling in the world than when you see somebody else get promoted, even if it's above you, or see somebody else get the job they want to get or the class they want to get. And that's the feeling that I'm trying to give leaders through this book is, hey, it's not just about you. It's about helping those people that work with and for you to grow and achieve their hopes, desires, and dreams.
So I've got to ask, were you born with all of those leadership skills, or is this a process that you've gone through?
I tell a story in my book, and one of the guys on my team, I went from buddy to boss, and I thought I was doing a phenomenal job, and I wasn't. And there was a knock on my office door, and Mark, a detective that I worked with, said, hey, Eddie, you got a minute? And he shut the door, and I felt like I'd been called into the principal's office. And Mark proceeded to very respectfully tell me that I was being a jerk, and I was not being a very good leader. And if it wasn't for that conversation, I probably would have kept going on, kind of like in the Matrix, just in this little world, fantasy island, where I thought I was doing a great job, and everybody else was looking at me and going, no, you weren't at all. So for me, it was that courageous conversation from Mark who kind of grounded me. And the only reason I can really tell this story is because I met with him much later at a Panera when I was doing some research for the book, and I wanted to make sure I got the story right. And he laughed. He says, I remember that, like, that was such a stressful thing for me to do, to tell you that basically you were doing a terrible job. But the only redeeming factor, and he said this, he says, the best part of that was all you said was thank you. Thank you for telling me. You didn't get defensive. You didn't make excuses. I don't remember doing that, but and he said, that's when I knew that there was a chance that you would actually go on to be a halfway decent leader. And I think on my best day, I'm probably average, but I'm trying to be a little more average each day. And I'm more importantly than that, I'm trying to help the people that I lead to grow to be even better than I am and to reach their potential.
I know you do speeches and motivational talks. How can folks get in touch with you if they want more from you?
Easiest thing is my website, www.edwardpallas.com or leaderarmor.com. Easiest thing to do.
I think you're a little modest when you say you're halfway an average leader.
I hope so. My best day.
Thank you so much for coming in. We really appreciate you sharing your story, and hopefully more folks will look up Leader Armor for their book, and also more from Dr. Ed Pallas. We'll be right back.